Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm excited to introduce to you one of my favorite people in the world. So thank you, Rajiv, for connecting us. We met at a networking event when I used to do the monthly happy hours, and that was before the pandemic and all this craziness. But I'm excited to introduce to you the founder of Speak Truth, right?
Spark truth.
Oh,
Like,
Spark Truth.
yep,
Spark Truth.
yep.
You're an executive coach. You do a lot of talent development, leadership,
Mhm.
coaching, and you do both the business and you also have personal clients as well, right?
Correct. Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Krista. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me. It's always such a joy, and I say joy to be in your presence. Your energy
Aw.
is always, I've always appreciated it. Even when we first met, I said, I got to keep connected with this guy. He's just,
Aw.
it's just, you're a light, which the world needs more than ever.
Aw. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because like when you think of business folks, you don't think like necessarily grounded or like but you have that spiritual side to you as well because you do talk about like law of attraction related
Mhm.
topics. So yeah, I find it interesting because I feel like that's becoming more common now where
Mhm.
business folks are coming from more holistic and thinking about the overall well-being instead of just like the doing side of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more grounded the business leaders are, the more effective they are in their organizations. It doesn't matter what industry or how large the organization. I think being grounded and making sure that they are full energetically, even at a physical level, is really important, especially when you're leading others. You really do need to lead yourself first.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think when most people think of leadership, they think more external focus,
Mhm.
right? But it not a lot of people talk about like the internal aspects of leadership and it all starts from within.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the kind of creating the foundation. It's inside out. So first getting grounded, knowing who you are, knowing your strengths, and then also knowing maybe what gets in the way. And then that is when you can really be present and available and help lead and inspire others. But I do think that part, I call it like getting your house in order, right? It's really focusing on you within, then you can lead others. But I found the most successful leaders start with themselves first.
Yeah, and what got you into all of this? Because there's so many programs out there and there's so many people that aspire to do what you do and they say, "Oh, one day I'll do that," or maybe towards, the end of my career I'll do more like of that.
Mhm.
Um what kind of prompted you to really take that dive and get really into organizational development and L&D?
Yeah, it definitely was a process, but it was one that did start early. I am a sociology major, business minor. So, and this
Yeah.
is before HR was really called HR. But I knew that at an early age that the training side of things, the learning side of things was where I was interested in. So even in college, I had an internship working for a hospital, and I think I wrote my first like diversity program in there. It was based on diversity, which was interesting at the
Oh.
time. And I don't think we really used it, but I was actually doing the internship for class credit. But early on, I knew that learning and training was where my interest was. I really
Mhm.
picked a major like sociology where I was really interested in it. So I went with that
Hmm.
and got my first job out of school in training for a retail company. But as everybody else, your careers evolve. Then I was out of HR, I was in sales, I was in marketing, but I find myself for the last at least 15 plus years back in the learning space and in the coaching space.
Ah, that's interesting. What prompted you to make a move outside of training and development? And then I'm sure there was a reason why you got back into it.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is like, what I always go with, like what's happening in your world and the messages that you get. But I do, at the time, I wanted to become a generalist in HR. I had done training, I did recruiting, and I kind of got bored just staying in one specialty. So I wanted to be well rounded. but it was difficult. I couldn't land a job because I didn't have the benefit background or the 401k background. So,
Mm.
so wouldn't you know, my next employer was Cigna Healthcare.
Oh,
So it's interesting. The industry didn't want to take a chance, but I actually went into benefits more on the sales and service side to
okay.
help benefit managers. So I probably learned way more about benefits than I
Mm.
would have even if I was in HR.
Yeah.
So it was kind of the world saying, this isn't, it wasn't the generalist job, which just wasn't coming to fruition or quick enough for me at the time, I guess. And
Mm.
so then Cigna Healthcare, so I went into a sales service role, which was a lot of learning. Explaining people their benefits when their benefits are changing is a pretty delicate training because these
Yeah.
people are used to their benefits. I mean, benefits kind of equate to money, right? What is
Mm.
your benefit, medical benefit, and dental benefit package look like? So that was kind of what brought me into more of the sales and the marketing.
I see. I love how you took matters into your own hands and you actually went for it. I think most people would be like, "Oh man, like that's not fair. Like
Right.
I'm never going to get hired as a generalist." But you kind of, you took the more unconventional route too, right?
Mhm.
But like you said, you learned so much in that process, and I'm sure that that sales and marketing aspect and client services aspect helps you create relationships and yeah, it helps you get contracts, right? As you do a lot of, I know you do a lot of consulting and contract work as well.
Yeah, definitely. You have to know about the client, and the fact that I was out of HR for a little bit, I think it was good because I got to see what the client wants. And being a business person, I think that helps me to be well-rounded. Not to say that HR people can't do that, but I think it was helpful for me to be more in the business side of things to kind of get that view of it. And I think it helped me to be more well-rounded. So it was, I think it's helped me move forward as my career has evolved.
Yeah, and I saw that you've worked for a lot of different types of company and like I would it's safe to say that I would say you're an expert in the world of organizational development and the evolution over time. Like how have you seen it changed more recently the last few years? I know technology obviously is changing things and I'm sure like even after the pandemic or the pandemic is kind of over now, right? But are you seeing any trends that L&D folks should be wary of?
Yeah, I think it's changing times. And I do think that employees now are looking for different things than they were 20 years ago.
Mm.
I do feel that people are looking to have a voice, looking for their purpose. And not that they didn't when I was in my 20s, but it's much more prevalent now. And people are looking at the entire package on, what's the environment like, what are the hours like. I do think people are looking at everything holistically, where I'm not sure that that's what I was looking at the time when I was looking for a job. But I think we've moved into that. And I know the pandemic, although there was a lot of tragedy and change and challenge with that, and I don't speak lightly on that at all. It was an opportunity for people to get clear and really go within and say what's
Mm.
important in my life. And I know that you kind of did a lot of reflection during that time. I myself did a lot of reflection as well and moved
Mm.
and kind of changed some things in my life that maybe I wouldn't have done otherwise if
Uh,
I wasn't presented with the time to really take a step back and reflect and figure out what's important to me. I think people
mm.
are having more of those conversations now
Mm.
more than ever. And people are seeing that, now more people are working from home. I've worked in
Mm.
environments where we really didn't work from home. We went into the office, which I think there's a lot of value in going back into the office as well. But now I think people are looking at this hybrid approach and saying, okay, I can work from home, but then I can still go in as well. So that
Mm.
I think is a challenge for a lot of organizations on how are they going to be integrating and reintroducing people back into the workforce. That's a challenge for the companies, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think part of a company's identity, or some of them, there's such a huge office culture. I mean,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
visited in the LinkedIn office. That was like a perfect example of like how strong.
amazing.
Right. But to your point, like people that have families, or maybe business folks who were more traditionally like, well, I'm going to work hard and that provides a pretty awesome life for my family. Now they're saying like, well, actually, why can't I have both? Right. Like still be
Mhm.
committed to my career, but at the same time, be there and be more present to, maybe even go dropping my kids off at practice, whatever, right? That I might have had to hire someone to assist with some of these other things. I do see that people are kind of evaluating like, okay, is this worth it? Like maybe I'll make $10,000 or $20,000 less a year, but to be there for the crucial stage and some of my kids, school activities like is worth that trade-off, right?
Yeah,
So
especially in the tri-states, so many people are commuting to work too, where if
yeah.
you think about those times that you're commuting in, can be at least an hour, some 2 hours where people have gotten that time back. So that's
Mm,
precious to people. Even myself, when I decided to go out on my own, I was used to going to an office every day and I missed it. There is
mm,
a transition. You're used to routine. I would
mm.
get up, get my coffee, go on the subway, walk the rest to work, say hello to
Yeah.
people, and, really making that shift to, being at home. It's a change for people, but I do think people have adjusted fairly well to it. A lot have,
Yeah.
and have appreciated a little bit of the difference.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts on? I mean, maybe this is just a New York thing, but I do think business folks in general tend to be just so action oriented that we often don't take enough time to reflect and give ourselves space to kind of, like you said, like be intentional. Sometimes it's kind of just the next
Yeah.
promotion, and I think, like you said, this opportunity really, like even for myself, like I never thought I would take a 100% remote job, right? Like I'm similar to you. I'm pretty social, so it's just crazy to think, 2 years ago, if we were like, hey, are you gonna take ever gonna take a 100% remote job? I would have been like, no, like that's crazy. But now, like you said, I do find myself like having a bit more space to like write and reflect and read a book and slow down a little bit. But I'm still committed to my job, right? Like I'm still performing. So it's been interesting.
I do think you need both. If you're always go, 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 how can you reevaluate what you're doing and how it's going? So there needs to be both. I mean, you can't just sit on a mountaintop and meditate, I mean, I'm not for that, but I think in the beginning of your day, if you can spend 5 minutes just saying, creating that intention, or, having that cup of tea or green drink or whatever,
Mm,
whatever fuels you, and take that
yeah.
moment. And I think that's when the magic happens, when you can slow down a little more.
Mm,
Because if you're always go, 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 you may be missing a lot of messages or signs or opportunities that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So sometimes slowing
mm,
down gives you that opportunity, that perspective to take a breath and take a step back and see, how things are going, rather
mm.
than just being going on a sprint. So taking that moment to be
Yeah.
more intentional and reflective.
Yeah, and totally different topic, but I'm curious, like, how'd you come up with the name Spark Truth?
Yeah. So I don't think of myself as a light, like I'm more of a spark. So my hope is that I can help people connect with themselves and find their inner truth. And I'm all about integrity and being aligned with who you are and what you have to offer.
Mhm.
So truth was just something that rang for me and was alignment,
Uh,
because I'm all about integrity. And integrity is shows up a lot of different ways. Do you keep your word? Are you aligned
mm,
with your values and what you have to offer? So
yeah.
that word spoke to me. And then again, I want to enlighten people, but my personality is more of a spark than a
Uh,
light. So
huh.
that's kind of how I came up with the name. A lot of consultants use their full name. I just was more drawn to come up with something different. And I really came up with it myself. I didn't go to any fancy, marketing companies. I mean, maybe I should have, but it was something that resonated for me, and kept it.
That's cool. And like you said, a spark is the begin, like it helps. There's like a catalyst, right? It's like a
Yeah.
chain reaction, right? So it's cool because you help others find alignment with who they really are. And then even at an early age, like when you were interning, you talked about diversity, inclusion, belonging before it became cool, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Well, and I think that everyone, even as a coach, like people know their own answer. It's just you don't always like what comes up,
Mm,
or it's something different that what came up. But I do feel that people have their own answers. And as a coach, I'm just helping you to figure that out through
yeah.
my questions, through my presence, through listening, through giving space for people to really tap into their own brilliance because
Mm,
we do know the answers. It's just sometimes some things get in the way of that.
yeah.
And there's resistance. I think the deeper you go and the bigger you play, there's more resistance. But I
Mm,
find leaders that are really connected with their own truth and who they are make the best leaders. And that may
mm,
be leaving companies, that may be changing things up in their life. But I
yeah.
do find when that alignment's there, the possibilities are endless.
That's a good point. I remember reading somewhere that said that leadership is just authenticity, right? It doesn't look a certain way. As long as you're 100% authentic, that's you being a leader, right? Because your truest form, and you're like really diving into yourself, and um that. And sometimes like that's like, I know for me, like when I was younger, I felt like I was always like too receptive to other people's feedback, where I didn't even know what I wanted because it was just like what everyone else wanted, whether
Right.
it's like parents or mentors or managers or VPs or directors, etc. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I would say only more, especially during the pandemic. I feel like I'm like, all right, like let's slow down. Like let me just take a couple of days off and just really think about like what I really want, you know?
Yeah, I think it's all about going within. And look, if there's a pattern happening in your life and you're hearing feedback, the same feedback from people, I think it's worth
Yeah.
looking at, right? Sometimes we can't see things about ourselves where others do. So it's
Yeah.
worth thinking about. But to your point, I'm always like, well, what do you think? What do you want? It's not really about what other people want, but it's really about, what do you think is best? And it's getting people to trust themselves because
Mm,
I know that at times people don't trust themselves. Even for me, still, sometimes I don't trust my intuition or I rationalize. And I find that I'm generally right. It's just
mm.
me trusting myself or me not always liking what comes to me about my intuition, whether it's playing bigger or taking that
Uh,
risk or changing things up that
mm.
I need to do, but I may not be ready to do.
What are your thoughts on? Because I hear one of the most common rebuttals or responses is it's if they have a family, or if they're married or they have kids or whatever. Not to say like that's not a valid, like, being mindful is important, but I often hear that that's what gets in the way of what they actually want, because they're like, well, I have to pay the bills, I have a mortgage, like I can't just change career paths and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's very relevant, very important, and it's not to be dismissed at all, right? I mean,
Mhm.
people have to pay rent. I mean, I left my job when I was living in New York City, one bedroom. I was supporting myself. It was difficult, it was challenging. But I would say to those people that yes, you want to provide for your family and want to you need to provide and take care of people. There's no doubt about that. But are there ways that you can do it where they're aligned with your values? Are there ways that you can do it where you are bringing in income, but also on in working for a company that you enjoy, the people around you? So I do find that we have far more choices and power than we give ourselves credit. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's easy, it is not, but
Right.
it's about making the choice of getting back your power and saying, okay, what do I have control over, rather than just
Mm,
throwing your hands up. But look,
mm,
providing for yourself, providing for your family. We live in the tri-state. It's expensive. I
Yeah.
lived in Manhattan for 10 years. Like it was challenging. It was tough. But I
Yeah.
do find that as you take baby steps, like small steps to creating or finding that role that you really enjoy, or creating that life that you enjoy. Maybe you don't love your job, but you love other aspects of your life. I mean, that's what matters. But yeah, all those
Mhm.
things are going to get in the way. I don't know how they
Mm.
don't. And everybody has their own resistance to that. I mean, that's life. So it's
Yeah.
how do you work through the challenges and not get paralyzed? Because a lot of times when you say I have no control, there's nowhere to go from there, right? You're kind of
Mm.
stuck.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think just having a choice, just being able to have agency over and not blaming it on other people, right? I think that's the thing. I think a lot of people tend to blame external circumstances, and we all have circumstance, right? There's always going to be, what maybe it won't look exactly like the pandemic, but there's going to be circumstances, right? There's going to be family deaths, there's going to be, people are going to get laid off, or company mergers and acquisitions and roles or redundancies or whatever. um and yeah, I think that we live such a comfortable life now. Like, I think the world's just, everyone's so like, for the most part, people are very comfortable now, right? So even though technology has helped us so much, it's also probably been the death of us. Like, a lot of people just are so comfortable that they really don't like any discomfort whatsoever,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, and with the discomfort comes growth. It's those times when you lose your job, you lose your relationship, you move, you do something different. That, I mean, I'd love to say it's when like everything's status quo, but I find real change happens when things are a little messy and they're not in this neat box. And I think you're always going to have some challenge in your life. And it's about just having the choice, even if you're in a job that you don't enjoy, but choose it. I'm in this job because I have two kids and I have this beautiful house and I'm staying in it, but it's still a choice. And
Mm,
I've learned, I'm getting better. I'm not fully there, but most of the time when I have some sort of challenge in my life, I am more apt to look within than go outside. I don't blame the person. I don't say it's
mm,
them. I don't say it's my circumstance. I've gotten better at it. Again, it's a work in progress, but I've gotten better
yeah.
at saying, okay, what is this person teaching me? What
Mm,
is this situation doing for me? Because I find when you're provoked and something is unsettling, there's some learning in that for you
hmm,
in one way or another. There's some
yeah.
lesson for that. So it's less going outside. So all the greatness in my life, I've created. All the dysfunction in my life, I've created, right? I've created both.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at things that way, you have more power. And
Mm,
with power, you can take action. If you feel powerless, you're less apt to do anything about it, which is also an action. When you don't take any action, that
ah,
is still an action, right? Inaction is still a
yeah.
choice of, you know what, I'm going to just sit here and not do anything. And sometimes we need to do that.
Mm,
Sometimes it's about getting on your couch, watching some Netflix, and just chilling out with some popcorn, right? It's not all about, even me, sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't need to read another psychology book. I don't need to read another self-help book. Like, I'm good
Yeah.
today,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to go out and take a walk and enjoy nature. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
I think that we're just so like, let's go on to the next and go on to the next, that, it's being present and where you are. And sometimes it's like, no, I'm going to just be with my family. I'm just going to be with my friends. I'm going to take
mm,
the day off. I'm going to sleep in, making
yeah.
time for that as well, rather than just always striving. Or, it's interesting because, being a learning person, right? You're always like wanting to learn. And I always, at
Yeah.
one point, I would say, I was always like, okay, this class is going to change me, this is going to be it. This is going to be it. And
Mm.
Davidson, I realized that it's like, no, it's just you're on to the next. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's no one class or, oh, I'm going to work with this teacher and this is going to be it for me. And each opportunity did add to my life, did teach
Mm.
me something, but there's never an end all be all. I didn't feel, or I don't feel
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of life. Like there's so many paths you can choose and there's so much more to learn. I think I think that's the challenge, right? I think it's like, how do we know, are we doing this? Are we learning for the sake of like, oh, there's in the past, like I wasn't good at school. So now I'm gonna show everyone that I'm a smart person. So are we overcompensating for stuff that maybe happened 20 years ago? Or is it coming from a genuine place of like, well, no, like I just really want to be the best version of myself. Like maybe it's interrelated. Like maybe it's hard to separate the two, you know?
Well, look, I think we bring all of what happens to us in childhood. It has shaped our lives in one way or another. I don't
Yeah.
think it defined us, but it does shape us. So
Yeah.
again, it's checking in and saying, what's the intention around this? And I think,
Mm.
look, learning is good. I'm in the world of learning. That's, I'm in the right role, I feel at this point, in the right space. But there are
Yeah.
times where, you can take a break, and that's okay. And not, focus on what's next.
Yeah, I think the breaks have helped me grow the most in some ways. Like meditation was always like one of the hardest things for me because I was just like, oh, it's so uncomfortable to not be reading a book. But today I just had a 20-minute meditation and I was like, wow, like I
That's a
feel
long
like,
time. That's
yeah,
a long time to meditate. Yeah, that's an
yeah.
accomplishment.
And it was uncomfortable, but I was like, wow, now I feel like I have so much more space, like in general, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been meditating for a long time, and it's interesting. I just recently moved to a new apartment, and I haven't really gotten back into my routine that I need to do. But I never judge it. I mean, I always have all these thoughts. I don't have this like big aha, but I do think when I start off the day like that, there is a certain level of calm, and just it's not
Mm,
like rushing and running into the shower or rushing
yeah.
on a call. When I have to do that, it does change up the energy of my day.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, even starting, I mean, 20 minutes is a long time to meditate, but even starting at 5 or 3 minutes, I think it
yeah.
helps set your day. I mean, I do that, and I usually pray or do some sort of gratitude,
Wow.
after that, because that's what, speaks for me. But everybody,
Mm,
to have some sort of routine in the morning, it's always helpful to start off your day if you can, even if it's for a
yeah.
minute,
Yeah.
everything helps.
Yeah, yeah, meditation for me, like being a doer, and I think a lot of the New Yorkers have that
Mhm.
doing energy.
Yeah,
Oh my
sure.
God, I think it took me like 2 years until I was like, I didn't judge my meditation anymore because, I was like, oh, I don't think I'm doing it right. Like I don't feel as calm as I feel like these other people next to me
Right.
feel. Always comparing myself to other people's experiences.
Yeah, like people say, "Oh, I'm so clear." I'm like, "Really? That never happens to me." Like, I mean, it's like, but I don't judge it. I think even when I don't do it, when I don't meditate, um, I don't judge it. It's like, okay, well, there's tomorrow. I'll try it tomorrow. I think it's another tool that you have to access more of a connection with you, really,
Mhm.
and to calm and breathing and just some simplicity, just so
Yeah.
in a life that can be, things are pretty complex.
So I know you moved from, like you said, New York City to
Mhm.
somewhere that, maybe is not as crowded as New York City.
Mhm.
Um, what's that been like for you? Like, do you feel like it's harder to have those like run into like random people, like on the streets of New York? Like, how do you go about still getting that social connection that you need being an extroverted person? Do you have to be more intentional about setting like coffee chats and things like that?
Yeah, well, I've only been here, it'll be a week today, so I don't have it all figured out, just letting you know. If you
Yeah.
saw my office, there's like still like papers and things disorganized. So, which that's the
Okay.
first thing I need to do is keep my house in order, like even physical, right? Where do things go? And I have a 2 bedroom, so for me this is
Oh.
luxurious because I had came from a 1 bedroom, so I actually have an office. And just
Yeah.
like, what's that? So I feel grateful for that. But I don't know yet. I do think that New York, the last year was a different place. It was
Yeah.
not really for me social. at all. It was more, you're in your apartment, doing a lot of Zoom meetings, and
Mm.
I was near Central Park, which was a blessing. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of fear in New York, and rightfully so. So,
Yeah.
the social part really last year for me was not as much. I got to see some friends. We would go for a walk, but it
Mm.
wasn't a lot of social, which really helped me to reflect on, like, why am I here in New York?
Yeah.
So I don't know the surroundings yet in the area that I'm in now, but it's a suburb in Pennsylvania. The train is right near me, so if I need to go into New York City, it's like a 3-minute walk. So I actually can take a
Mm.
direct train to New York City, which is good because I still have clients there, and I still like I love
Yeah.
New York. New York is an amazing city. But I think for me, it was time to change things up. I have now a little balcony that I can sit on.
Mm.
There's, I can walk around. Obviously getting a car was a different
Oh yeah.
experience, so I got that. So it's just a kind of a new way of living. But I was in Hoboken for 7 years and then the city for 10. So it's interesting
Mm.
enough, even though I've come from the suburbs, I have been in more urban environments, and then Boston before that. So I've been in a lot of urban environments, but I think for me, I needed, a change for myself.
Yeah.
And I think COVID just kind of pushed it um, a little bit sooner for me.
Yeah.
But I was feeling it even before COVID that, I
Uh,
was in the same apartment for 10 years, which I don't think I've ever lived somewhere for 10 years straight because as a kid,
yeah.
I moved a lot. So, you
Yeah.
know, so 10 years was a big commitment, a long time. And I kind of had outgrown it, I had energetically, I think I just craved a new environment. But, um, but yeah, so that's what kind of made me move. Um, because this city at the time, I mean, I think things are getting, people are going out more. It's I think coming more alive, but it was very
Mm.
quiet. I mean, last March, it was like last year, it was really you were on Park Avenue and there was like no one. It was just
Yeah. It,
so
so
crazy.
eerie. Yeah.
It was a little bit like, and I'm Upper East Side, so it's definitely more of a neighborhood. It's not like Midtown, but it was just unbelievable, the stillness in New York City where there's no stillness, right?
Yeah.
It was an experience to be in, but I was glad I was there. And, again, New York City will always be a special place in my heart. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, there's a certain like grit and like resilience that New York has. I feel like just being the center of just a lot, there's always something going on. I was living in Midtown East, like by Grand Central, and I remember this was crazy. Like you said, in March, the end of March, and ends part of April of last year, and I remember walking for like an hour and a half, like to Fifth Ave, like around um like Union Square, like for over an hour. And I think I ran into like five people the whole time. And like that was just
Right.
mind blowing. I was like, whoa, this
Right.
is so crazy.
Yeah.
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 So it was really, but I do feel being there, I think, New Yorkers are very resilient and they were just so kind. Like people be like, no, you go, because everybody was worried about, everyone's wearing masks in the space. But I think there was a lot of compassion and love in New York during that time, which
Yeah.
really made it unique and special. Like I just think people had a little more heart, even more so, and
Yeah.
which was very touching during a very challenging time for pretty much I think everybody. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody that it wasn't. It was just a different challenge for each person.
Right. Yeah. I think just having that shared experience brings us like closer together, right? Because, normally different classes would be like, well, you don't know what it's like to experience the same sort of adversity I do. And people are always comparing, like, oh, who had the most tough upbringing or whatever. But then that experience, it's like, no, even if you were wealthy, like you still had to go through it, right? So I think that shared experience brings people closer together, but yeah.
Yeah, it's more at a human level than anything. It's just that at the fundamentals. So
Yeah.
Was really touched by that, and I was aware of it, which was really, there's a lot of gratitude in that, and really seeing that and experiencing that.
Yeah, it sounds like gratitude is like a really big part of your practice. Was there like a pivotal moment that helped you create that practice, or has it always been a part of your practice?
Yeah, so I think I learned about it more in my 20s through Oprah Winfrey. I get a lot of my stuff
Uh,
from Oprah.
yeah.
And she had somebody on a book where it was gratitude. Sarah is her first name. I can't remember her last name, but she wrote a book on gratitude. And I remember in my 20s, I had a gratitude journal, and I wrote 3 things I was grateful for every day. I think I did it for
Mm.
6 months in my
Yeah.
20s. And some days it was tough to find something, right? It was like
Mm.
I had a good cup of coffee, right? It was a tougher day, but I think it does help shift your mindset on looking at all the things you have. Look, in the US, we are incredibly grateful to have what we have here. I mean, so many people have less, and there should be a lot of gratitude for what we have in this country.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of things that we do need to work on as well, but
Right.
it's really looking at our lives, and I think it's a lot of times I work with clients on having gratitude for themselves first. I think
Mm.
we always say when we think gratitude, we're thankful for our families or our
Mm.
jobs. But I do think gratitude is another inside practice that as we
Mm.
are more grateful for ourselves, we can have space to be more grateful for.
Ah, I like that. You're right. You're right. I haven't noticed that, but yeah, we do tend to think about others when we think of a gratitude practice. But if we truly appreciate and respect ourselves, there's so much more room for space for everyone. That's really good. I like that.
Yeah, so it's like compassion, self-compassion. I am a recovering perfectionist. So I found that I wanted everything perfect. I didn't want to make a mistake, and it wasn't
Mm.
necessarily something I was conscious of, but the work that I've done on myself, I've realized that that was, how I was playing out. And I
Mm.
find that I have much more compassion. So if I'm late to something, I'm like, okay, I'm not as like so crazed about, or if I make a mistake or say something, I don't think about it incessantly and saying, oh, I'm
Mm.
really messed up. I kind of do my best to let it go and say, okay, do a better job, next
Yeah.
time. And I think it creates space for my own compassion for others because I am practicing it for
Mm.
myself. And a lot of times people practice it for other people, but they don't practice it for themselves. They're really hard on themselves. I don't know if it's all my
Yeah.
clients, but I feel like they are always like, they can be open and available for other people or forgive, but when it comes to
Mm.
themselves, they're so hard on themselves. And I find that, starting to shift that and being kinder to us actually will open up even more kindness for other
Mm.
people.
It goes back to our first conversation about like starting from within and then creating that space and then um yeah, I mean even for me like I feel like I've done every self-development program, Tony Robbins next up,
Yeah,
but
sure.
but still like today or even yesterday I'm like, oh my God, like when I was like 10 or 12 I was kind of mean to my sister and like, oh man, like it's like it never stops.
Well, that's it. I think there's got to be a point where it's like enough, it's like, okay, you do the
Yeah.
best you can. And like excellence is still really important to me. Give my, I do my best to give my best to my clients, to be really available. Because I think the work we both do, right, is a blessing. I think it's
Yeah.
a gift. And I think it's a privilege, really. When you help coach and you teach others, I don't take it lightly. So there's times that I may speak out or I'm too direct or like I'll feel bad. But I really try for every intention to be really present and available. I love
Mm.
somebody's getting an Amazon package. I see that.
I think I
Behind.
bought the book, The Obstacle is the Way. I think that's
Yeah, there
probably
you go.
mine.
It's on its way. It's there. It's all right. I'm not making fun because I have to pick up something in my package room after. So but
Yeah, yeah,
Amazon has like changed, my life, especially living in the city at the time. But anyway,
yeah, yeah.
sorry. But yeah, I just think, you know, again, back to it's always an inside game. And I think I know that more and more as I've gotten older and learned myself. So yeah, there's your book.
Yeah, you heard the doorbell. That's
So
funny.
um yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all coming back within. And I think the great thing is, with the work that you do, it's like the more you learn about yourself, the more you focus within, you're just better. It's like
Mhm.
a lot of what I do is I I look at myself so I can be that present and available for my clients. And I'm
Mm,
able to see things through my intuition, through my gut. I think early on in my coaching career, I didn't always trust myself, and I think now I trust myself more. Look, I don't
mm.
have it all figured out, and there are times I make mistakes, but for the most part, as I've started to really believe and trust myself, I think things are, possibilities are endless.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love hearing that. And I do think that with like every year you trust yourself a little bit and a little bit more, right?
Right.
Like, I find myself being sometimes like the younger person in the room. And sometimes, in the past, I was like, oh man, like how much value can I possibly add? Like, they have had so much experience. But then the more like every year, like I can own like, okay, well, I do add, even if it's just energy or passion or excitement or whatever it is, right? Like I'm contributing something, right? Even though it might not always be tangible.
And Davidson, for all this work that you've done more work probably at where you are than a lot of people have. So it's
Right.
almost like you've accelerated the process maybe more than others.
Right.
Because you've started at an earlier age, which is
Yeah.
great because, I remember one time I took this class, and I was in my 20s as well. And they're like, you're so glad that you took it so early. And I go, I guess, right? But I do
Yeah.
think, you've invested so much in yourself that you know far more than you think. And I find when you're in the room, you're invited in the room, you're supposed to be there.
Mm.
Period. Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter where you come from. That
Yeah.
opportunity's been presented to you, you need to be there and need to be present and share your ideas. Period.
Mm. Yeah, that's refreshing. You're right, because it used to always kind of, I wouldn't say annoy me, but it was always like, why do I keep hearing this? Because a lot of people, like you said, how a lot of people have said they're like, wow, you're so lucky that you're starting this early. They're like, I wish I started like as early as you did. And then you hear it like every single time, and you're like, what the hell? But I do see some truth to it, right? Like, I'm so glad that like, I have this beautiful life, and it's like almost like sometimes I pinch myself because I'm like, wow, like I feel like I have, like a pretty amazing life. And I feel like I've already reached a lot of my goals that, I mean, I feel like when I was younger, I just didn't really think about these things. Like I didn't think like, oh, how many houses do I want, or how many books, or how many people do I want to impact and stuff. But it's just weird because I'm like, wow, like I'm actually reaching a lot of goals that I thought would be possible at my age. So it's cool. But like you said, it's truly is a privilege, right? And it's a combination of like everyone else's help, but to your point, also me owning that, like, no, I had a part in it as well. Like I actually put in the effort and have had uncomfortable conversations, not only with myself, but with others, right? To kind of, but yeah, it's certainly been a journey for sure.
Yeah, and I think that everyone has those conversations, and maybe it gets a little easier, maybe, when you start to really confront and talk to people. And, maybe it's a little easier for me than 20 years ago, but it's still hard. And I think knowing that everyone is evolving, everyone's doing, I mean, my mindset is everyone's doing their best. Yes, there's some people that maybe are more harmful or people in your life, but I just think generally
Mhm.
people are doing the best that they can with what they have. And
Yeah.
I go from there.
Yeah, I mean, like perfect timing actually. Yesterday I had like the deepest conversation I've ever had with my sisters and my father. So he wasn't around much for the last 18 years of my life. And I reached out to him and I was just like, like we were both crying on the phone, but I was just like, thank you for taking care of us unconditionally, like for the first 15 years of my life. And thanks for coming to my wedding and thanks for coming to visit. So he just stayed at our place for a week.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just kind of share gratitude for him actually making an effort. He doesn't have to come back, even though it's 18 years late, at least better than never. But yeah,
But
normally I
created,
wouldn't like
right?
show gratitude. I would be like, F you, like get out of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, you created that space for him to come. It wasn't really about him. I think you created an openness that made him feel comfortable to be able to come and do that. So I think the more, I mean, like the good news and bad news is the more conscious you get, the good news is you can make really good decisions and be more open and vulnerable and loving, and because and but then the bad news is that you're more conscious and not other people are, so there's more responsibility in being able to be that light in the world and to make space for people to be, and you created that. That's more you than him. I think your energy was in a place where he could show up and be there, and that's pretty remarkable, on his part, but really on yours as well. So
Yeah, I like what you said about it is a responsibility, right? Because I do think, because I would say like we're both at a place now that we're both like privileged enough that we do have the responsibility to just make the world a better place, right? And sometimes like, I feel like if I was just based just on feelings, like sometimes like I don't feel like doing certain things, but sometimes I'm like, well, just because I don't feel like it doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do. So I do find myself sometimes like, oh man, like I kind of don't want to have this difficult conversation about like, stop Asian hate or BLM or whatever, but it's like someone's got to do it.
right,
So
right. Yeah, and sometimes you say, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna have that conversation. There's sometimes you're like, you know what, I can't today. I need to respect where I
hmm,
am. I need to respect my boundaries, and I'll do it
yeah,
tomorrow, right? I think
yeah.
working with yourself, that it doesn't, all that responsibility doesn't fall on you, but if you can do your part, that's great. That's all that the world needs. I think sometimes people
Hmm,
are over responsible, and
hmm,
but you really need to just take care of yourself and do what you can. You can't, and other people have to do their part as well.
hmm. Yeah, that's a good reminder of it's okay to say no, right? Like you said, giving yourself space and setting that boundary so you're not overexerting yourself and you're not exhausted by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the boundary setting has been something that I have really had to work pretty hard on myself. And it's been a journey for me, in setting those boundaries. And it first starts with you respecting your own boundaries. Like, I'm tired now, it's 11 o'clock at night. Like, I'm going to have to do it in the morning. Or, you know what? I need to take a walk around the block. I'm exhausted.
Mm,
Whatever that is that respecting your limits. Like, I've really had to learn, I do have limits, and a lot of times
mm,
I would push through them or not listen. My sheer will would push me through, and sometimes maybe that wasn't the best way to go about it.
hmm. Wow. Well, this has been a really good conversation. So much, just I think it's perfect timing too, right? As we integrate back into society and
Mhm.
we're all kind of like done hibernation and things kind of slowly kind of get back to normal or some semblance of normalcy. I think it is a good reminder of like not overdoing it too, right? Because I'm sure initially it might be uncomfortable to be in large settings because we've just been isolated for so long. So maybe just slowly integrating into it, and a big takeaway from this conversation for me is that I don't always have to be the one to take the first step. Like, and I think it's once in a while, right? But also, it's okay to take a day off and recover and take some time to just do hobbies and stuff like that too, you know.
And
That's
that adds
important.
to your cup, right? Then, when you add to yourself, then you can give, right? When you've done
Yeah.
something fun or creative or something that's good for your soul. So then you can go back out in the world and then really give from a place of really being able to give, not because of
Mm,
obligation or
mm,
responsibility, but really giving from your heart, which I think is really important when we give, that we really give just to give.
mm. Well, that's Krista, I want to acknowledge you for your big heart and you just being so intuitive and you really tapping into your heart and like your soul and just being able to see like the best in everyone and bring out the best in everyone and also modeling like well-being and good behavior, right? Like what does it look like to take care of yourself and then also be someone who impacts and change lives at the same time, right? So thank you for just being so awesome. I appreciate you.
Well, you're a joy for me. So anytime I can hang with you and talk with you about these things, I really, it fills my cup. So thank you for having
Oh,
me and giving me the space to share my thoughts and ideas and really being open and available. So thank you.
oh, and last thing, do you want to have a plug to your book that you're working on? Or?
Oh, way to put me on the spot here. So I am. I'm writing a fiction book. It's about a woman's transformation and learning about herself through the intimate relationships she's had in her life. Um, I'm I'm 94 pages, I think, in. I'm working with a writing coach. So look, all our coaches, I need coaches as well. And I'm hoping to create a fiction book where people can reflect and see their own self in, and possibly do it for book clubs and just have nice dialogue and discussion. I live in the world of, self-help and that sort of thing. And I do write different articles on LinkedIn, but I thought writing a fiction book would really tap into my own creativity and write from a different way or a different lens. So that's why I
Yeah.
chose fiction, which I never thought I would, but I took a writing class
Mm,
and I said, this would be fun. So
yeah.
it's a work in progress. I'm committed to it. So we'll
Mm.
see. And I'll keep you posted on when it gets published.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm sure I'll have you back on the podcast after your book
Yeah.
releases. And yeah, I think fiction is a good way because it's far enough where people don't feel like they have to do something, but
Mhm.
but like you said, it's introspective enough that they see themselves in the character that they say, huh, maybe there's something there for me. So I love it and can't wait to support you and yeah, your book project.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. And oh, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so people can reach me via my website. It's www.spark. It's SPRK. No A in it, just Spark. And then Truth, TRUTH.com. And then you can always send me an email at Krista, which is CRISTA at sparktruth.com. So yes, love to hear from people. And again, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Likewise, and I'll also include the link to your website and your email as well in the show
Perfect.
notes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista. Have a great day. Bye.
You too.